Hello, I'm Raquel Maestre, comedian, producer based in Montreal, and I'm gonna be interviewing people involved with the history of non-shitty stand-up in the city in the last 10 or 15 years, and I'm very happy to be talking today with James Brown, who was one of the co-creators of Squad Laughs. Hi, James. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. For those who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
So I lived here in Montreal from I think 2015 until 2.5 years ago, and in I think 2017 or 2018, I had maybe a bit earlier, 2017 maybe, had started my show Squad Laughs, which was it became sort of popular. People liked it, and yeah, I was very proud of what we did with that. And now I'm back in town and I'm reviving the show for one time, so I'm excited to go through that again.
Yeah.
And to re-experience sort of everything that I loved about doing comedy in Montreal.
Yeah, there's a lot about it that I want to talk about. A bunch of my friends have great memories of your show, and they've said great things to me. Back then, I was living in Montreal, but I was too much of a broke immigrant to leave the house. But I have some friends that told me they did stand up for the first time at your show. I've been doing some research on the internet. I saw a Cult MTL article that described your show as a comedy show with a progressive mandate. Do you think that was an accurate description of the show?
Yeah, I think so. It really began, so to like give a bit of a history of the shows, it really began as like a house party sort of thing. So I lived in an apartment with my brother Steve, and I was doing comedy a little bit around town, but I didn't love most of the shows going on. And I had come from a background, and I have 3 older brothers, and they were all really into like punk music and that version of like DIY and doing house shows. So I grew up, even as a teenager, I grew up in Prince Edward Island, but I played in a punk band with a bunch of people who were like a decade older than me. We would like play in basements around town. And that sort of was so exciting to me, and we even did a mini tour of the Maritimes, and like it was all house shows and things like that. And that was so exciting to me, and I didn't really understand why that didn't exist in comedy. So I just, decided to have a show where the idea was I'm just going to convince a lot of my friends that they should try comedy at the show, and then I would host it. And we did that 2 or 3 times, and eventually just sort of got too big for my apartment, so we moved it to a venue. And at that point, when it moved outside of my apartment, then it sort of became, now it's a public event, now it's something we're inviting people to, so we need to be a bit more thoughtful about what it is that we're trying to do and what it is that is the mandate. And my friend John Michael Hanchard jumped on to help co-produce it at that point. And that's when we sort of started to have a bit more of a mandate to be inclusive and to make sure we're not only, a big part of it was encouraging people to try stand-up who've never tried it, and especially who maybe didn't always feel comfortable trying it. And then we would also bring in some comedians who it would be a mix of people who'd never done stand-up before and people who were doing stand-up around town, but that was always a pretty curated selection that we would bring in to try and just make sure it wasn't another Montreal comedy show that was full of straight men and that was full of like just that weird edgy humor that tends to come along a lot with that crowd when you get a room that's only a bunch of straight men like making and they're the only ones making jokes, and they're just making jokes, I guess, for themselves. So I feel like it had a mandate to be inclusive a little bit, but also I feel like I was just trying to make a good show and one that I thought was funny, and there was so much going on that I didn't find funny in the shows around town. So I just wanted to not be like that, essentially.
Okay. You said that you had done some stand-up comedy before. Were you doing it in those spaces that you didn't find funny?
Yeah, there were some shows, like I remember there used to be a mic at Burritoville that was fine. It was, but even that was like, it was hit and miss because it depends who's doing it that night. But then there were some other shows that, like, I won't bother to name them. But I remember I did a show one time and it was just the like, I really didn't like the brand of humor that everyone was going up and doing. And then I remember also, like, pretty much the only people who came were like my friends and like came to see me. And so, like, the whole door, and I mean, it wasn't much money, of course, but it's like the whole door was brought in from like my friends, but it was just run by these like older dudes who just, like, I remember they really, like, I think they like resented me a little bit or something, or like really did. I was a newcomer, so they just like didn't want to be welcoming. So I remember they didn't give me any money from the door, even though like everyone had sort of, like, the entire crowd was literally people that I knew. And then also I just tried to like chat with them after, and it's like they just like were so unwelcoming. And I just felt like there was sort of that vibe in comedy in Montreal at that point where there was like a couple guys who sort of thought they ran the town because no one else was really putting on a lot of shows or things like that, and it was so like boring. So yeah, I didn't see other shows very inspiring in terms of what they were trying to do at that time. So I guess I just eventually decided, like, you know what, I'm just gonna make the show that I would want to go to because these are terrible. And I was embarrassed to like invite my friends to come to shows because it's like, I know I was gonna be funny, or I would hope that I was gonna be funny, and I know that like my brand of humor would be like, would sit well with them. But it's like I would invite someone to a show and it's like you would just get like 3 comics who like were pretty offensive and pretty like it, and not funny at the same time. It wasn't even like you got anything good out of like their like edginess or anything like that. They were like crude and like would be like transphobic or would be homophobic or would be like sort of racist or like or like super misogynistic and not funny at the same time. And I just like, I didn't want to do those shows anymore. It was so unenjoyable to just every time you go out to do stand-up feel like it's not necessarily gonna be like a good show.
I think I know the feeling. Around what year was that? When did you start
I
Squad
feel like
Labs?
2016 or 2017. Maybe like summer of 2017, or maybe it was 2016. Around then. So I think that summer was in my apartment for a little while. And then maybe by like winter of 2017, it became a public event. And it became sort of what it was known as.
You mentioned that a lot of the inspiration came from the punk DIY shows. You mentioned there were not a lot of comedy shows that you found inspiring. Was there any exception to that? Like when you started, even if it was maybe not a very recurrent event, were there like any comedy shows before yours that you were really excited about? Or was
To
it
be totally honest with you, not really. And that's not to say that there wasn't interesting stuff going on. But another part of why I started the show actually is because I have like a hearing issue. I have like sound sensitivity. It's called hyperacusis. But so I can't be in super loud environments all the time. So I wasn't able to do comedy as much as I wanted to. So I couldn't like explore. I didn't have time to like go to every different room that was going on and figure out, you know, these ones are okay. And the ones that I did go to, I wasn't very impressed by. And these were the ones that it seemed like most other people were doing anyway. So I feel like I got a decent lay of the land there. So that's a part of why I just decided to do my own thing too. But to be honest with you, not really. I remember the Burritoville open mic was fun. I liked that room, and it was cool. And it was run by good people too, and so I liked that room. But then eventually that left, and I don't know. I didn't love a lot of the shows that were going on. And then I feel like not long after I started my show, other ones started popping up. Stand Back being a huge one that I think was really, really popular and just such a great show. And then my friend Melina had a show, Funny Moves, at Barlow Ritz. And there were a few that started popping up that just felt like, okay, this is more of like what I wish had existed before. And so I feel like, yeah, it really wasn't long after I started doing my show that I feel like the scene sort of took a step forward in terms of what I thought in terms of like fulfilling the potential that I thought could be there. Because there was always funny people, and there was always like good comics who I think were really agreeable essentially, and who I would want my friends to see, or I would want to like do a show with these people because I found them really funny. But it was just the question of getting rooms where consistently it's the lineup is vast majority, if not every single comedian, is someone I could endorse and have a lot of respect for.
All of that, I can sympathize with a lot of those feelings. When I started my own show, it's very interesting how the patterns repeat. You talk about the beginnings of the show, how it started as a house party, and then eventually it grew so much that you had to move to a venue. At what point did you see that the makeup of the audience was maybe changing, like, and there were more people than just your direct friends? Was that a thing, or was it always like the audience only just your friends?
I was always surprised that, and no, I think sort of immediately there were definitely people there that like I didn't know, and I was always surprised that anyone came to the show that like I didn't know personally, because I mean, I guess it's I don't know, I just was always so pleasantly surprised when people like liked it, and it became popular in a way that I didn't really think was going to happen, I guess, where just, yeah, I think it became sort of an important space for people, and it became like a reliably good comedy show, and I feel like made stand-up comedy a little bit more accessible than it had been for people, because before that show, I don't know how many rooms existed. Yeah, that people felt comfortable going out to even watch the comedy and knowing that they would think that it's good. So I feel like pretty immediately, maybe the first public show we did, I felt like I knew most of the people there. But then even after that, it just sort of grew a little bit. So we moved into a venue that could probably comfortably have about 45 people. And it was a really cool spot called Peut-être on Park that I don't know if they do anything anymore. It was sort of an underground spot. But we did 3 shows there, and by the end of it, I remember the owners just looking at me after the 3rd show and being like, I guess you've outgrown us, because it just like, it was so packed and it was so like, it wasn't sustainable. And then we moved to La Plante, which was a really great DIY space as well, and was a really great home for us for the rest of the time that we were doing the show. But by that, when it got to that point of like, I guess you've outgrown us, and we were a 50, a max cap 50 room, didn't really fit it. It's like, I don't know 50 people who would pay $5 to come see my jokes. So it's like, it definitely wasn't all my friends at that point. And I think it just, I don't know. I think Montreal is a small community too, especially the like Anglo scene of like somewhat young people who are out and like attending art style events or music shows and things like that, especially on this side of the city, on like the northeastern side of the city. It's like it's a small community. It doesn't take long for you to realize that like, oh, there's a ton of people that like if I don't know you personally, I know someone who knows you. So I think that's how it spread too. So I didn't know a lot of the people there, but it was also just maybe a friend of one of my friends, or I don't know. So it wasn't. It made sense a little bit that the reach was growing a little bit, but I feel like it always was the community that I initially thought would be interested in it, which was just the sort of alternative art scene in Montreal, which I feel like was a community I was already familiar with and sort of wanted to tailor the show to that anyways, because I feel like that was missing. So it wasn't like a conscious decision at a certain point that we need to veer in a direction to sort of reflect the audience a bit more. I think it was always trying to be sort of what it ended up being, and it sort of maintained its identity, I think, throughout the course of the whole time that the show was like a public event.
And you've mentioned a couple of venues, and was it always geographically in the same area?
Yeah.
So was it Mile End, Plateau?
Yeah, it was in the Mile End. So it was, I had, my apartment was on the corner of Park and Bernard. And then that was a big part of when I had to move the show. I really didn't want to make it move more than like 2 or 3 blocks. So it went from Park and Bernard to Park, right in between Bernard and Van Horn. And then it moved to La Plante, which was on Van Horn and like Hutchinson or something. So it never moved more than about a 3-minute walk from itself, which I was very happy about.
God. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, it was sort of a dream that there was always sort of another space so close by that was ready to sort of take it. And I mean, that's been one of the things that has changed so much about the city ever since the pandemic, is like, now I don't think there's shows going on at any of those spots. So I was very lucky that the timing worked out, and that so many people had done so much work to make sure those spaces existed, and that we got to use them while they existed, because it was such a vital part of being able to make the comedy show that I wanted to be able to make.
From what you're telling me, it looks like you and the other people running the show with you didn't seem that you had to go out of your way promoting the show. That like word of mouth was working very well, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And I even like, at one point we started, because we were doing bi-monthly shows, and word of mouth was working great, and it just was at a size where there was always a good crowd and things like that. Eventually we moved to monthly for a little bit, and I found that amount of frequency started to make the crowd dwindle a little bit. So I moved it back to bi-monthly, but I was always so specific about the way that I wanted to promote or brand that show. Like, one thing I never did was, there was like a Montreal stand-up comics Facebook group or something like that, and I never wanted the show to appear on there in any form whatsoever, because it's just like, I wanted it to just feel like a cool show that you sort of like have to know about a little bit. I want to like create this atmosphere of like, it feels like I'm in on something when I attend this. And so it was always, I tried my best not to sort of over promote the show, or not to make it too frequent, so that I feel like there would be a bit of an air of excitement around it, rather than just it's something that I'm constantly telling people to come to all the time, or that I'm constantly, buying Instagram ads or something like that to do that sort of thing. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to keep it like ever so slightly secret, but not really.
This is something that we were discussing a little bit before we started the interview, but you guys were making a point of booking people from marginalized identities, or people that didn't have much background in stand-up. Did you have any kind of rules, written or unwritten, about who got to be booked on the show or not?
Not written for sure. And I think it was a vibe thing, and I think it was just there was always just the conscious effort to ensure that it wasn't, just a lineup of straight men, because I felt like that would just isolate people. It definitely would. So there was a conscious effort to just ensure that the lineup that we had was varied, and that it was a space where anyone felt comfortable going up and telling jokes, and where anyone could go up and talk about their experience and sort of receive the laughter of the audience in the room. Or like, I guess it was a response also, to who the crowd was, which is, it wasn't a bunch of straight white dudes. So it's like, we can't book that way. And also, just over time, it did get a bit of a reputation as a really welcoming place to try comedy if you want to try comedy, or a really welcoming place for any, queer or just non-straight men comedians who are in the city. So it didn't take long before people were, contacting us to just ask to do the show. And it wasn't hard to just select the ones that we liked, essentially, and just not put up people who we didn't feel would fit the vibe of the room.
From what I understand, and from a little of what I've seen, there were also like comedians that have gone on to have like great careers and have done a lot of cool stuff. If you had to, and I hope I don't get you in trouble for this question, if you had to name some of the bigger names that did your show, who comes to mind, people that the viewers might recognize?
Yeah, for sure. Trana Wintour has done the show before, and is doing the show here when I'm in town here, so that's really exciting. Big fan of Trana, and she's now a reality TV star, so we love that.
Love Trana.
Yeah, and then there was Ines Anaya, who was in Montreal for a long time and is now in Toronto. She was on Serious Top Comic and has done some stuff on CBC, so that's very cool to see. My friend Ben Sosa Wright, I met him just through school in Concordia, and he was a big improv guy, but he had never done stand-up. But I asked him to do it, and he did it at my house when it was just a house party. And I didn't realize, but it was the first time that he had ever done stand-up, and now he's like, quite successful.
Yeah, he did
in Toronto and doing
Just for Laughs, New Faces
yeah,
of comedy.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really proud that that the first time he ever performed stand up, it was in my apartment, and then we would always do a show around when Just for Laughs was happening, or I think for 2 years we did that. So we would have not huge names, but there would be people and friends, and a lot of people from Toronto, honestly, who were in town. And so Gavin Matz did it, who is now in New York, and he's done, I think he won Serious Top Comic one year. And Nick Nemiroff, who was such a great comedian and has passed, so we all miss him a lot. And Brandon Ash Mohammed, who is so funny, and I think he's one of the writers for Canada's Drag Race, or was, and I think he even got like a Canadian Screen Award or a Gemini Award or something. So it's been so cool to see. It's such an honor to have been able to just make a space where those people want to come and perform, and it's so fun to then meet these people and just like get to enjoy their success from afar a little bit, and just see that they're out there doing incredible things, and get to smile and just be happy that I got to spend any amount of time with them and got to see them go out there and be hilarious, because each and every one of those people that I named was just so funny when they did the show.
If you had to choose just one specific thing, what was your favorite thing about running the show?
That's a really good question. I just loved like the excitement that it brought in my life. I remember I had the weirdest rituals on a show day. Or not the weirdest rituals, but I remember for some reason I would always eat a Big Mac on the day of the show. And then it just like that was kicking off like I would do that around 5 p.m. or something, and then that just kicked off like for the next like 6 hours, because it was such a sort of like event show. It happened every 2 months, and I like was pretty precious about it. So for the next 6 hours, and I often would host it, so that's like a lot. I was like on the whole time, you know. And so for the next 6 hours, I just like I felt so purposeful and so excited, and I loved just getting to watch new people that I'd never seen perform before, or see friends who I really loved and respected just go and and perform, and just like I was blown away each and every time, just with how, I guess successful might not be the right word, but like successful the show was in terms of just like it was a really fun room. It was so fun, and I would just like I would look out at the audience and they were having such a good time, and I sort of can't believe that happened, because it went beyond what I could have imagined it, because it's just what everyone loves about comedy. You love to make people laugh, and of course also you love to make everything about you. I feel like that's a part of being a comedian, is that you want to like make people, you want to be the reason that people laugh. But it was like I guess it fulfilled that thing, I guess, that is maybe one of the reasons I started comedy in the first place, is like I wanted to be the source of people feeling good in a sort of way. And it allowed me to feel that in a way that went beyond just performing, I guess. Whereas I could be sitting in the show and just feel like, wow, it's incredible what we did. And it wasn't just me too. It's John hopped on. My brother Steve was really great to let me do the show, and he helped put it on when it was in his house. And then Tatiana Olal ran the show with me for like a year or 2 years when it was in La Plante, and she was so helpful. My friend Chris Hernandez would always do sound and do music for it, and he was such a huge help. And then the people at the venues were such a huge help. So of course it wasn't just like me creating something, but just that feeling that I got every single time when the show was happening, and then I could just look out and there were so many happy people, or I could tell like some of the dumbest jokes in the world and receive laughter. It was just like such an incredible feeling. It was such a high. And yeah, so I guess it's just that feeling is what I loved. It's not like one specific moment, but it was such an intoxicating feeling that every single time we did a show, I was just so happy, because it was exactly what I wanted to be doing. And I sort of couldn't believe that other people enjoyed it as much as I did, or like enjoyed it enough to come out and make that whole thing possible and make it the very, very special thing that it was.
You say that you don't have a specific memory that is like a favorite. That was a question that I was going to ask you. But to ask a little bit about the other side, what was some of the most challenging things about running the show?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think just having a show where we decided that it was going to be inclusive and we were going to brand it that way. It's like, I am a straight white man. So it's like, I definitely had to realize that like, I can't, like I have blind spots, and I need to ask people things a lot, or like I need to bring in people who represent sort of a diverse group of communities, and who aren't just a bunch of straight white men again, so that I can understand how to put forward a show that everyone feels truly welcomed at. And so I think that is what was difficult, but also the most rewarding thing was just like is just yeah, I guess like asking for help and asking for people's opinions or yeah, just like I remember there were a few times where because comedy is not without its fair share of controversy or like perhaps even slightly unsavory characters or things like that. So it's like, and I think you run a show as well, so you know all too much about how often when you run a show, people are reaching out all the time to try and do the show. So that was a thing too of like, whenever someone asks to do the show, if I don't know them, then I have to ask around and I have to especially ask people I trust and ask people I trust that will have a different perspective than me, so that I'm not missing something, and then so that I'm not accidentally doing something in the space that makes the audience feel unsafe or unhappy. So I think that was not difficult in terms of like, oh, I hated doing this, or like it was like super 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 challenging, but it was just something that I always had to be conscious of, was that I have blind spots and I don't intuitively know what needs to be done, so it just was always required some amount of vigilance and some amount of just work to make sure that I was working with people and I was talking to people who could help fill out what I'm missing in terms of my experience and my perspective, to make sure we're working together to create a show that is really welcoming to everyone.
And the show went on for, was it 2 or 3 years?
It was like 3 or yeah, I'd say 3 years. I guess 3 years. Yeah.
Did it end with the pandemic or what?
I don't remember the last show that we did. Like, I don't remember what when we did it, it was not at all like, this is our last show, okay, this is a big goodbye. It ended with a whimper, not with a bang. But I guess it ended with a bang. I think every show that we were doing was really good. So I think it was a great show, but the pandemic happened, and then I went to go stay with my parents. My wife and I went to stay with my parents for Christmas and PEI. Then we didn't come back to Montreal for like a year. This is when like lockdown was happening and things like that. So then we came back for a year and then we moved away a year later. So it just, life changed so much that sort of the show, it had to shut down because of the pandemic, and then it sort of just didn't really, it was like the moment just ended. Mm-hmm. Which that was okay. But I don't remember the last one that we really did here. I don't remember it as being the last show, so I'm really excited to do the show again, and get to understand the fleeting nature of things like that, and that, you know, the things you really love can sort of end before you realize, and that can be so bittersweet. It's I don't have any negative feelings about the fact that the show ended or anything like that. Life moves on, but there is a part of me that it took me like 2 years almost to realize, like, oh, we're not like that, the show is never coming back in the way that it was, and that it ended, and that it took me probably 2 years to clue in that it was over.
Wow. So yeah, like we're recording this on Saturday. I'm gonna do my best to put it together and upload on time to like remind people that you're having the show.
If it comes out later too, I mean, they'll just know. The show, I'm sure the show happens on Wednesday, and I'm sure it went really great.
Yeah.
If it came out later, it was incredible. You should have been there.
Wednesday, October the 2nd, 2024 at 9 p.m. at Notre Dame de Kiel after the Polymic. It's going to be the 9 p.m. show at the Polymic Double Bill. I'm very excited to see it. I will be hosting the 7 p.m. mic, and I'll stay around. Well, I have two questions about it. The first one is like, how do you feel? Uh,
I feel great
the show.
about the show
Yeah,
coming up.
yeah.
I'm so excited. I feel really great, and I because Trina and Nancy Webb and Rachel Genren had their show Stand Back at Notre Dame de Quay, and I was lucky enough to do that show twice, and I remember those being some of the best shows I've ever done. So I'm so excited to be back in that room again and to be, just back in Montreal again and doing comedy and just sort of, able to sort of do something that I didn't know if it was ever going to happen again. And I'm so thankful that you folks have created a space and created a space to sort of promote alternative comedy and created a space where that's possible for people to come and put on a show. And also I'm so glad that it is in the place that it is, because I really loved that bar, and it's such a nice space. And there's not a lot of like rooms in Montreal where I would want to bring the show back to. I really didn't want to just do it again just somewhere for the sake of doing it again. So I'm really, really excited to be able to relive that excitement and that joy, and I think it'll be such a good show.
Have you prepared anything special for the show, or can you tell us, what should people expect?
So I am hosting the show, and every time I would host the show, I would always like pretty much all the material I do is like all new material. I sort of loved doing that, which I know is not the best way to do comedy, but I would, so it's like there's gonna be a lot of jokes.
That's something very interesting. I don't know if any aspiring showrunner will ever watch this, but when you start doing stand up, they tell you like you have to have your tight 5, your tight 7, etc. And that makes a lot of sense for like comedians going a certain way. But if you have a recurring show and you want people to come back, it makes a lot of sense to like give them something new.
I really felt like it was my duty to not tell the same joke twice at that show. And then also, when I'm hosting, I would do a decent amount of time, so it ends up being a lot of joke writing, which was so fun, and it allows me to sort of veer into different directions, or like I have a lot of time to fill essentially. So it allows me to try things that I would never have the courage to try if I was just going up and trying to type 5 at someone else's show, and that's all I was ever doing. So I mean that's part of what people can expect, and part of what I hope that some people liked about the show, because I feel like it was such a prominent flavor, was like I would tend to go up and like I love telling some like terrible jokes that are like not like dad style humor, but like that brand of like groaners, like I guess like I would tell some pretty elaborate groaners, or like also just like somewhat complicated jokes that like take a few minutes to get the whole way through. Like it would just be weird stuff, but I guess that's a bit of what to expect. Is like I think it's all funny. It usually people laugh, but it's just I don't think it will feel like just any show that you go to, because I think it has a certain flavor and a certain I think it's a little different.
Yeah, I am excited, and I think those were all the questions that I have for you.
Cool.
Thank you so much for taking the time, and I think it's going to be a very interesting night. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, again, for not just interviewing, but for also working so hard to create a space that, like, I'm so excited to have come back to Montreal. I haven't been here in 2.5 years, and I haven't been really active in the Montreal comedy scene since before the pandemic. And it was so cool to come back and just see there's so many more, like, super interesting things happening than there were when I first started doing comedy, and it feels so nice to know that that sort of humor, I think, is in much better hands than it was a decade ago in this city. And I'm, so excited that that's going on. And so, thank you for everything you do to help create that, because it's so important. And as I've learned, so inspiring for so many people. And that's just such a positive thing to put out into the world.
Oh, well, that's all for the interview. Again, Wednesday, October 2nd, 9 p.m. at Notre Dame de Kiel, Squad Labs. Don't miss it. Bye-bye.
Cool. See ya.